What should be done about the, I don't even want to frame it this way, the immigration issue? What should be done about that? And also, how do you reach people? Because I've had increasingly encounters with people who aren't, I'm not even going to judge them or qualify them. I'll just say a lot more people than I would have thought are accepting the narrative of illegals, aliens, and if this is audio only, I'm putting those in quotation marks, being responsible for the economic suffering in the United States. And people of both parties and people who aren't particularly, I wouldn't have thought of them, I should say, as xenophobic, really accepting this narrative that we're being invaded at the borders. So what is your guys' response to that?
I want to put something that happened in context. First of all, when I personally voted for Andrés Manuel López Obrador, because I was feeling that his humanistic side was going to be a real frontal part in the way we would be talking and dealing with the immigration situation that we have been dealing with. At some point, it didn't happen in 2023 in Ciudad Juárez. There was an incident. 27 people died out of a fire, and that's something that he hasn't been able to solve. There's nobody that is in a process of justice, as many other cases, like for example all these corruption things that he has been talking about for 6 years. He never proved anything, nothing about the maternal facilities, nothing about the other a lot of other things that he called corrupt. So I would hope for a humanistic vision about it. And also for a successful dialogue with the United States. Unfortunately, Trumpzilla is pretty much walking towards us. Trumpzilla, and I really hope Sheinbaum will be able to deal with that, and she will have to have a lot of support from the country. We are dealing with an immigration crisis, and that's not something that I say. It's something that I have been researching for the last months. A lot of interviews with people that work with them. We have been actually being witnesses of how many immigrants from Haiti, from Central America, have been becoming part of the city scenario, and in many other places in the States. I'm just talking about the Mexico City because I live here, and the way they have been used for political reasons, like not very close to where the place I live. There is the Haitian community living in the street, and then at that time, the alcaldesa, the mayor of the place I live, Sandra Cuevas, was saying that it was part of the mayor of the city of Martí Batres, and neither of them were able to solve it all. And we're talking about like human rights.
Yeah.
I have to say, López Obrador didn't do anything. His policy was not successful, and I hope for the best, but I highly doubt it, unfortunately.
I would say similarly to the last question, I think the problem begins and ends with U.S. policy. And I think what we've seen is the U.S. is not meeting its international obligations to migrants and refugees and asylum seekers. I think they've obviously put extraordinary pressure on Mexico to implement some very strict immigration controls to stem the flow of migrants, and Mexico has conceded to that. And it's one of the areas that I've worked at. I've traveled many times to Mexico's southern border with Guatemala, talked with a lot of migrants. It's an issue that's personally important to me. I can hear the same kind of conviction from Miguel's voice as well. It's one of the places where it's been really disappointing to see the way that they've been scapegoated, the way that they've been abused. I mean, every migrant you talk to will tell you the hardest part of the journey isn't the Darien Gap where many people die. It's through Mexico. It's where they have to deal with extortion. It's where they have to deal with violence. They have to deal with kidnapping, with organized crime groups. It's really, really quite terrible. But the point that I wanted to make is that this wouldn't be an issue if the US had a responsible migration policy, if they actually had legal pathways for people, and if they stopped engaging in imperialist policies that create migration issues in the first place. If you look at the actual trends of flows, for a while there, many of them, where did they come from? Honduras. Why? Because there was a US-backed dictatorship in Honduras.
Thank you, Hillary.
Where are many of the migrants coming from now? Venezuela and Cuba. Why? Because Cuba is blockaded and Venezuela is dealing with economic sanctions, right? And so actually one of the interesting things that I find really disappointing about some of the discourse in the United States is that López Obrador should be criticized. I think the migrants, while they're in Mexico, should be able to receive protection and better treatment, and they're not. They end up having to make these impromptu camps, which are horrible conditions. And I think that's something that could be easily changed with some investment. If you could actually just, respect the human rights of migrants and try to treat them better while they're here, whether or not they move on in their journey, I think is a separate issue. But while they're here, they should be treated better. But López Obrador has talked about the fact that if you want to stem the migration, the flow of migrants, stop engaging in these policies. He explicitly called for lifting sanctions against Venezuela, lifting sanctions against Cuba, ending the blockade. And that's never part of the discourse, right? Yeah. That's never part of the discussion. And you talk to any Venezuelan migrant and they will tell you that they would be happy to go back home if conditions improve there. And they don't, because the US has once again imposed a punishing, brutal economic sanctions campaign against that country. That needs to be part of the discussion as well. And it never is, right? The border is going to be shut down tonight, apparently. You know what that's going to result in? It's just going to overwhelm an already beleaguered Mexican system that is led by somebody who probably should be in jail because of his responsibility with this fire that killed so many people in Ciudad Juarez, into the jaws, more like it, of organized crime groups that are profiting from human smuggling. I mean, you know who's happiest with this news that the border is going to be shut down? It's the human smugglers. It's the people who are going to now make more money getting people across the border because there isn't that many legal pathways. I mean, they have this stupid app that doesn't have enough spaces, that barely works. They have a limitation in terms of where you can even apply. For one of the reasons why there was a point in last year that Mexico City was full of migrants was because Mexico City is one of the first places where you can finally start to use that app and apply and ask for one of the spots to be able to go in, right? Like, this is not serious policy. They have international obligations that they're not respecting. And obviously there's going to be apparently a phone call between the leaders of Mexico and the United States soon around this, because the truth is the US can't carry out this policy without Mexico's help. Now, but I would disagree with some voices out there who say, well, the solution would come if Mexico just refused. I think that's unfair. You can't ask a geopolitically weaker state to stand up to the United States. I mean, Trump said explicitly, that's how he was able to get Mexico to cooperate. Like, if you don't do this, I'm going to raise tariffs on your goods. And the longer you continue to refuse, I'm going to keep raising them. And it was obviously going to destroy the economy. And as always, as it is so true in so many countries, right? Who are the first people who are thrown under the bus? Migrants, right? I think López Obrador made a political calculation. Look, Trump says that if I cooperate with him on this migration issue, he'll keep his hands off of my domestic policy, and effectively that is what happened, right? And so, they can't be treated as bargaining chips. They are human beings. They have human rights. Those human rights should be respected. I think one of the demands we should make of Claudia's government is precisely that. Migrants, when they're in Mexico, should be protected. They should be afforded comforts, security, migration authorizations, work permits, whatever it is. The actual border issue, that's far more complex. That involves negotiating with another country. But I think one of the key things that we should expect of a humanistic government is better treatment and respect for human rights of migrants.
That we haven't had.
But we haven't had it.